All right, this is our last section for chapter 2. This is 2-6, proving angles are congruent. All right, vocabulary. So let's complete each sentence with proof or prove. So Galileo wanted to prove that planets revolve around the sun. His observations and discoveries supported his theory, but were not a proof of it. So, vocabulary builder, theorem. A theorem is a conjecture statement that we prove to be true. So a conjecture is our educated guess, but we haven't proved it yet. A theorem is our guess that we proved using steps and procedures. So we use definitions, postulates, properties, and previously proven theorems to prove theorems. Okay. So a postulate is a theorem. That's false. A postulate is something we assume to be true and does not need a theorem or a proof to go along with it. A theorem may contain definitions. That's true. An axiom is a theorem. That's false. An axiom is very similar to a postulate. This is the most basic. It's something we just assume to be true that we don't prove. Sometimes we can't even prove it. This is like a basic fact of life. Okay. So number 6. So we're going to complete each statement with lines, planes, or points. So through any 2 points, there exists exactly one line. If 2 distinct lines intersect, then they intersect in exactly 1 point. If 2 distinct planes intersect, then they intersect in exactly 1 line. And through any 3 non-collinear points, there's exactly 1 plane. Okay. So we have another theorem here, theorem 2.1. This is our first theorem, vertical angles theorem. Vertical angles are congruent. So if angle A and angle B are vertical angles, and measure of angle A is 15 degrees, then measure of angle B is also 15 degrees. Okay, so circle the word that best describes this angle paired in a diagram. So what is 3x and 2x plus 5? These are vertical angles. Okay, circle the word that best describes a relationship. Vertical angles are congruent. All right, so 3x then must equal 2x plus 40. So now we are going to solve this equation. So we have 3x equals 2x plus 40. I would first subtract 2x from both sides. So we have x equals 40, and I think that's my answer. X equals 40. All right. Let's prove the vertical angles theorem. So if I know angles 1 and 2 are congruent, prove that all 4 angles are congruent. All right, so I was given angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So given information. All right, notice 1 and 3 are vertical and 2 and 4 are vertical. So vertical angles are congruent. Vertical angles are congruent. All right, now look at this. 1 and 2 are congruent. These 2 things then are the same. And transitive property says then these 2 things must be equal. And then we already know 1 and 2 must be equal. So then all of them must be equal. So this is one huge transitive property. All right. So, congruent supplements theorem. If 2 angles are supplements of the same angle or of congruent angles, then the 2 angles are congruent. Okay, so if angle 1 and 3 are supplements and angle 2 and 3 are supplements, then angle 1 and 2 must be congruent. All right, so let's fill in the blanks. So here's angle 1, here's angle 3, and here's angle 2. So the measure of angle D is 135, the measure of angle G is 45. F and G are supplements, then the measure of angle F must be 135. If A and B are supplements and measure of angle C is 85 and B is 95, then angle A must be 85. Okay, so let's write a paragraph proof. Okay, so same proof as the previous one we just basically did there. we are given that 1 and 3 are vertical angles. Prove 1 is congruent to 3. So circle the correct word to complete each sentence. 1 and 3 are vertical angles. 1 and 2 are supplementary angles because they form a linear pair. 2 and 3 are supplementary angles because they form a linear pair. Therefore, the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 180 because the sum of the measures of supplementary angles equals 180. Same argument for the next line. By the blank property, one measure, see how they both equal 180? Then we can set these equal to one another. So this is the transitive property. By the blank property, so if I subtract 2 from both sides, so subtraction, 1 equals 3. So the angles with the same measure are congruent. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. All right, if 2 angles are complement to the same angle, or the congruent angles, then the 2 angles are congruent. So very similar to the previous statement. So if angle A is supplement of 165 angle B is a complement of the 75 angle, circle the relationship between angles A and B. They are the same, they're congruent. Okay, so putting these kind of together here, 4 and 5, all right angles are congruent. That's just a theorem we always know, all right angles are congruent. If 2 angles are congruent and supplementary, then each is a right angle. So if angle R and S are right angles, then angle R is congruent to angle S. If H is congruent to J and H and J are supplements, then H equals the measure of angle J, which equals 90. Okay. So let's cross out the theorem I cannot use to find the angle measure. So what are the measures of 1, 2, and 3? All right, congruent complements. So I have a 90-degree angle. I probably could use that. Vertical angles I see going on there. I don't know anything about 180, so I can't use that. All right, so right off the bat, 1 is vertical to the 90-degree angle, so it must equal 90 degrees. So I can label it. 2, 40 plus 90 is 130, or is opposite 50, whatever you want to do, vertical angles. So it must be 50 degrees. And then 3 is opposite to 40, vertical angles, so 40 degrees. Okay. So if angles A and B are supplements and angles A and C are supplements, what can you conclude about B and C? So A and B are supplements, that means they both add up to be 180. A and C are supplements. They both add up to 180. By the transitive property, the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B equals the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle C. So canceling out the A on both sides, subtracting out, we get the measure of angle B equals the measure of angle C. So angle B is congruent to angle C. And that is all for this section.